Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi everyone, welcome to News Dabs with Jimmy Young, a weekly look back at this past week in the cannabis industry from here in Massachusetts and around the world. Certainly lots going on here in the Bay State in the past week, and not all of it good. The governor's vaping ban was upheld by a state judge last week and backed up by the Department of Public Health. That state judge reprimanded Governor Charlie Baker and his administration about following the proper procedures before declaring a public health crisis. Now, one of those procedures is to hold public hearings, so before Christmas Eve, they'll have a public hearing. Until then, the vaping ban continues, basically shutting down an entire industry and setting up more cause for lawsuits. Governor Baker continues to play that public safety card that backs his executive rights to impose that ban. Another thing that has gotten totally screwed up here in the Bay State is the launch of the hemp industry. Sure enough, just when the first crop was ready for harvest, the state decides to follow federal law and not allow CBD infusion into any edible or beverage, dealing another blow to the nascent hemp/CBD industry right here in Massachusetts. That means in the Bay State, you can still get THC-based cannabis at medicinal dispensaries that also have CBD in them, but you can't buy the hemp-based CBD edibles at legally licensed adult use stores. Huh? Makes no sense. By the way, the Farm Bill passed by the federal government in December of last year allowed for hemp to be grown and CBD to be extracted for lotions and topicals, but not infused into foods and beverages. That interpretation is now in the hands of the FDA, and their decision on the amounts of CBD that you can infuse into food and beverage products might take a few years before their regulations are in place. Our friend Laura Boehner from the Healing Rose had committed to a new processing plant in Massachusetts just a few days before the state announced its ban. As reported by the Boston Globe, Laura said, "We're quickly losing sales to customers who can just order from out of state or go online. I'm the entrepreneur you want in your state, but I've seriously contemplated moving to Vermont or Maine because they have more sensible regulations." So Massachusetts is a legal THC cannabis state for adult use, but the government continues to make it as difficult as possible for those in the business, including those in the CBD industry. No wonder the illicit market is dominating. Good job, politicians. So how is this affecting the adult use sales market? I can't even tell you that, because the Cannabis Control Commission has not updated their public data on sales since the week of September 16th. That's over a month ago. Is it a coincidence that week was the first $10 million week in sales in the Commonwealth? Just a thought. In the meantime, there was plenty of interest in Burns and Levinson's third annual State of the Cannabis Industry Seminar at the Westin in Waltham. That law firm has a national cannabis law practice headed by Frank Siegel and Scott Moskal, both who led panel discussions for over 200 interested people last week. That included a one-on-one with Cannabis Control Commissioner Steve Hoffman, CEO of Garden Remedies, Dr. Karen Moncasey, Dan Fireman of MaryMed, also on those panels, and many others shared their experiences and their knowledge. Siegel was pleased with the growth of his annual seminar.
I couldn't be happier. Each year we're growing. I mean, we probably had 150, 60 last year. We're over 200 this year, and we'll do it again next year. And my goal is to get this as large as the interest is.
That wasn't the only show in town last week. The Cannabis World Congress and Business Expo welcomed a few hundred vendors to the Hynes Auditorium in Boston. There are quite a few featured keynote speakers and future guests on my podcast, In the Weeds. And I also got to sit in on a panel moderated by the host of the Canna Today podcast out of Colorado, Steve Blank. I was also there with George Moriarty of Sinking Alpha. CWCB Expo President Greg Marco was pleased with the record turnout this year in Boston, but is going to cut down his show in 2020 by a day.
We had record attendance here in Boston, and in 2019, this is our third show. We had record attendance for each show in our space, in our shows that we do. So since the inception of any one of our shows, this year in 2019 was the best attendance we have. Now, when you say that, when you stretch the attendance out over 3 days, it may not appear that way. So if you condense it to 2 days, it makes for better sense for everybody. Time, expenses, use of time, expenses, hotels, travel, and when you're in the midweek, it's actually more cost effective as well for travel.
Still plenty of business to be done in cannabis. After all, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Reporting for ProCannabisMedia.com, I'm Jimmy Young. Once again, we leave you with some cannabis-friendly events in the greater Boston area over the next few weeks.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
News Dabs is a weekly production of the Pro Cannabis Media Group. It is supported by Alternative Compassion Services in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. ACS is a leading provider of medicinal cannabis at 693 Elm Street in Bridgewater.